this happened the way it did so we can avoid it in the future. It did. Cool. Hey guys, sorry about that. We're going to try to get to the bottom of this issue so it doesn't continue. I'm trying to get squared away on the interface here so I can see you guys. But in the meantime, this is what we got, and I hope folks, I want to give folks a little bit here to get back in if they're not, so they can get the answers to some of their questions. My analytics are not currently giving me anybody being in the room, so if you know and you can let me know when we got some people in there, we can go back to answering the questions. So we got 2 viewers. I think one of them's Nick. So all right. All right. So I was going to say we have active duty military members. We always have. We appreciate our servicemen. We appreciate our veterans. We currently have 29 members who are active duty military, to my knowledge. We've had servicemen from different countries and not just the United States over time. We've also had, I've been there for a number of Asatru service people's funerals and veterans. Getting Thor's hammer on tombstones is a thing and recognized by the Department of Defense on official headstones at official military cemeteries. What's up?
I just wanted to let one of the viewers, Sotoner, he's the one that wrote the question. I was going to answer that after what you were saying, because I know he said it looks like I missed my chance. But no, I was going to answer your question from earlier. Sorry.
Nope, you're fine. I was just going to say, I was just going to finish that there's it's officially recognized by the Department of Defense. You're able to have them on dog tags. That's been a thing for quite some time. But yeah, and then, I think that's kind of the last of where we're at. But if you want to go ahead and get his question, that'd be great.
Well, and the issue being that I don't have the list of questions from the last one, but Sotoner, I was preparing to answer the question. I was actually looking some stuff up. I don't have the answer as to who the Irishman is, because he asked about, this is back when we were talking about the Native American ceremonies, that were witnessed, and drinking from your own well and things like that. He asked a question, who was the anthropologist that got a chance to look into that? And he believed he was an Irishman. But as far back as I can remember, the one person that's really worth looking into is a gentleman by the name of Clark Whistler. You can look him up on Wikipedia. You can see how the modern folks demonize him because he was a believer in science in the form of breeding and eugenics. They'll call him a racial scientist or what have you. But he was one of the guys that got to see the very rare sun-rich bone and hang from suspended from a pole. And really interesting guy to look into. Some of his work is there. Again, like I said, he was into racial eugenics and the idea of what breeding and encapsulating, good traits versus and weeding out bad traits for society could mean. Of course, like I said, it's going to be heavily wrought with he was such a bad person, but if you can weed through all of that nonsense, and his stuff with Native American is studies really interesting. And then also I found this too. If you go down to the bottom of his page, there is like a 50-person list of anthropologists. Am I saying that? Anthropologists?
Mhm.
Other members of his, sciences and their studies in list down at the bottom that are also very interesting to look into. And all of his works and papers are linked there as well. So Clark Whistler.
All right. So I think we've got a couple of other questions that have come up. Have you guys done sagas before? And if not, are they scheduled? I think scheduled is a more organized way of putting it. Yes, they are certainly planned. We want to go through a bunch of different pieces of the lore, just like we've done with the Hávamál. And the closest thing we've done to sagas is we did do with Wit and Brandy. We did a 3-part, I believe, series on Beowulf. But we do want to go through a number of sagas. There's a lot of things we would like to cover, depending on if it's working well and people are getting a lot out of it. I think this has been really beneficial. So we're going to continue our way through the Eddas. And then after that, we can start thinking about some sagas or other materials. The next question was, do you guys have weekly services at the Hofs like Christians do at church, or no? I would really, really like to. We are still struggling with the issue of distance. It's one of the things that is always kind of an interesting situation we find ourselves in. If we had a significant group of our folk that lived within a normal, whatever normal people do weekly for church, 30, 15-minute drive from our Hofs, then we would love to do that once a week. Right now, we've got kind of a window around the and that makes it a little bit more difficult to get attendance that many times a week. As it is now, we do once a month. And sometimes people might have things there. Certainly not limited to one service, for lack of a better term, every month at the Hofs. And like I said, the more we can get people to live close, or as our Hofs expand and we get people closer to them, we'll certainly have increased activity there. But that's where we're at present. Just kind of a footnote on it. I mentioned we're in year 30 of the Asatru Folk Assembly as it is now, and Asatru in its modern form has been around since, I believe, 1968. Or some version of it. We got our very first Hof in 2015, and that's Odin's Hof in Brownsville, California. So we're rapidly correcting these problems and getting a lot better, but we're still not quite there on some of the distance. It's a relatively short amount of time since we've had Hofs at all, and they will move closer to our members, and we will get more members closer to them. So it's kind of it's being accomplished in both directions, I'd say, on that.
I did want to speak too on that. I've been asked that before, and I wanted to bring up that the monthly celebrations that we do are, again, bringing ourselves into alignment with the holy tides. We, as Asatru, can hold bloat and sumbel at pretty much any time of the month or any time of the week. It's always a good time to give devotion to the gods and to give gifts to them. It's just worth noting that the reason why we do it monthly right now is because we are holding our traditions of making sure that we honor the holy tides. But, if we had a lot closer congregants that were able to maintain throughout the week and do bloats at any time that they saw or deemed fitting, it would absolutely be done. But so I always try to explain that to people, is that what they're seeing is predominantly the structure of the holy tides, the maintaining order and correctness throughout the year, but praying at home is good. But if we could get it to the point where we, would hold midweeks, or have a bloat for Tyr on Tuesday and Lord Odin on Wednesday and Thor on Thursday, that would be great, and we could easily do that. It's just, again, distance, time, lots of other factors.
So the next question that comes up, and I think it's a good one. I appreciate you went to the source and asked them. True, and Sanatana Dharma is sharing a common Indo-European root pantheon. He told me that Sanatana Dharma is the root. So remember that, and that there was never a Proto-Indo-European on this. So
I have a couple.
I want to go from last to first on this. That's just not true that there wasn't a Proto-Indo-European language or pantheon. Linguistics overwhelmingly prove that those things go back to a common root. And I'm not sure what he means if he says there wasn't a Proto-Indo-European language or pantheon, but that Sanatana Dharma is the root and that his pantheon is the root pantheon. Those can't exist simultaneously and both be true. I think that the way that he conceives, okay, and so here's the thing, to be fair, he conceives it, as far as I understand it, is that his Vedic, or however he would position it, but he uses Vedic terms, language and pantheon, be it Sanskrit, as the root, and everything else as a variant, descendant, other interpretation, or perhaps even deviation from what he feels is the original.
Something he just said.
Yeah, so I see that, but
I was going to kind of go down the road that he's talking about.
Well, so, okay, so I see that, and I'll also stipulate that I think the way that we conceive it is the root and the original, and everything else is away from that. But I also know that it's there's more to it than that. I know that, Old Norse words and stories are variants of much, much more ancient source material that have been revealed to us under those terms over time. I see the follow-ups there, and I appreciate. It's very nuanced because I don't know what that means to him. I don't think that anybody doesn't understand that European peoples come from a common root and source that is distinct. I would be surprised if he completely rejects that, because he spoke favorably of folkishness specifically in the Dharma Manifesto, but perhaps in other works and other things I've heard from him over the years. I mean, speculative is, I think, an overused term, and most anything that any of us are discussing would be described as anyone who is not a member of assembly, as to one degree or another, speculative. So it's hard to say exactly what he means by that. Yeah, so I'm curious, because he obviously believes that his way of doing things be doing it. And I will stipulate that, and clearly I believe that ours is the correct way of doing it, and I wish that he would come our way and be part of what we're doing, as he is an ethnic Spaniard So I think this would be the right place for him. But it's interesting. I'm glad you and he have had conversations, and perhaps his position has evolved over the years. I'm not sure. Svan, you had some thoughts on this.
Yeah, I think I might understand where he's coming from. When he's talking about is, I kind of got into a conversation with Thomas Sowell about this, and the usage of the word Proto-Indo-European is again a reconstruction or titling. The language is also reconstructed, so it's split, and the absolute like construction of the pantheon is again speculative. Mm-hmm. Everything was kind of worked backwards. Even the runic names that we use that are said to be, like Proto-Indo-European are speculative linguistic cross analysis. And I think that's what he's saying is that there, I don't think he's saying that there wasn't a pantheon, is that we don't know fully, because again, a lot of it has been worked backwards. And I hearken to that a lot, because the people that really like beat the drum on the Sky Daddy issue, they don't talk about the Earth Mommy issue. They want to know about Sky Daddy and who Sky Daddy is, and so on and so forth. And I say that with God, the Shiva, the Vishnu of the Aryan pantheon, the one and only Sky Daddy. They kind of dissolve away from the polytheistic tripartite that's clear in almost every Aryan branch. Every Aryan branch of faith has the tripartite. The only one that doesn't is the one that's speculative, which is the Proto-Indo-Europe, blah, 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 blah. I just call it like pre-Aryan, or again, Proto-Aryan, I guess is the best way to, but it's all, I think he's talking about the speculative, and that what we do have is just what you said. Our pathway is the root. His pathway, he believes, is the root. And that does have some merit. I mean, again, I think a lot of people do forget, and they want to like, oh no, there is a Sky Daddy word, so it's got to be, who's Sky Father? What is Sky Father? Sky Father this, Sky Father that, and it's like, never mind that there's clearly the triplication of the sky in every Aryan branch. They're just focusing on the speculative. I think they're doing that to kind of bring Christians in, and kind of make a correlation there. But I mean, he is correct in the sense that linguistically, there's a certain point where we can only speculate, and we don't have any tangible.
I think that goes without saying, and we would all stipulate that the further you go back in antiquity, the murkier things become, because the material for it is less and less. The language is absolutely, the descendants prove its existence, if not the specifics of its culture. And I think that, things differently, if we uncovered, a detailed codex of, how the most ancient area or used words or anything else. But one of those doesn't exist. The lack of all of the specifics of it don't mean that that culture didn't exist, or that there's not that root. Because there certainly is. The commonalities amongst the descendant peoples are so very, very similar, if not in some instances exactly the same. They're very clearly derived from a common earlier point. And it's one of those, that just is. I think that, the original deities of our people, in the correct way, and in some sense, that's not mutually exclusive. I don't, just as I mentioned earlier, I don't think that, somebody rode up on an elephant and said, "Hi, Indian Aryans, my name is Indra." And somebody rode up on a goat chariot and said, "Hi, Norse people, my name's Thor." obviously our people applied those names, and I don't, you know, that makes sense, and there's room for that if that makes any sense. But I'd be really kind of curious if he genuinely does not think that there is a link between Aryan peoples in antiquity. It would seem to fly in the face of all the evidence and just not be true if he says that. The only people that have suggested that are people who have very specifically done that for politically correct reasons post the Second World War. So that's very interesting to me. But I appreciate you asking that and bringing us his response.
I wanted to
Yeah, what do you got, sir?
say one thing.
Please.
Looking at the Aryans, and you know, I kind of look at them as four branches. You have the Vedic branch, you have the like Persian, but you know, I wouldn't say Persian, I would say Middle Eastern branch. You have the Mediterranean branch, and then you have the European, or, and I don't even like to use the word European because that's a Phoenician or Canaanite woman's name. Let's just say, you know, I guess the folk land, the fatherland, or the land of the people. You have these four branches. The Vedic branch goes down into India, and they intermix with the Dravidians. Over time, very long amount of time, they do write down some stuff, so there's a lot of substantialness there. Then in the Middle Eastern, you have what would eventually become the Iranians, but we're looking at kind of like, I would say, the Luwians and the Hittites. They intermix with the Semitic people. The Mediterranean, they do not intermix as much in the beginning, but they do eventually, mixing with the Phoenicians and having some cultural stuff with the Egyptians and so on and so forth. The Mediterraneans, also their living structure, the metropolis, changes a lot of the way. They were one of the first branches to really break away from the tribe and go into the city state, if you will. It's the folk branch that goes into what we call Europe today. They intermixed with Stone Age and Bronze Age descendants of the same people that they are. Like they ended up not intermixing with a completely different people, but intermixed with, you know, whether we would call them the Gauls or the Celts, or we could even go back to, like, you know, the early megalith builders. But out of those branches, the one that doesn't completely conjoin onto a different people is the ones that went into Europe, went into the mid and northern. So the Slavs and the Teutons and the Gauls, those three in particular, have, I think, a lot of the branches in relation to outside peoples. And then, of course, you know, we see the Gauls kind of getting absorbed into the Teutons or being completely destroyed by the Italo-Romans. But, you know, when you look at like the Etruscans and the Romans and the Greeks, especially with Etruscans, you can see a lot of the Aryan, you know, the fact that they called their gods Aesir is pretty, really, really interesting to me, that how much they are more closely related to their northern cousins. But again, out of all of those branches, the one that seems to be more or less internally functioning with itself is the Teutons, the Gauls, and the Slavs. And so I'm about Proto-Indo-European and Proto, you know, language and religion and pantheon as being speculative. 100% it is speculative. But to ask which one is the root or which one is, I would argue, least molested, I would not put of how they've absorbed and have steeped in Dravidian culture for so long. There's, at this point, we can't, it's very hard to separate the two. And it, you know, a lot of people kind of go to it. And then on top of that, if you are a European and you do go to the Vedic Aryan branch, you are still encapsulating a very alien branch. Like it's not something that you as a European can simply look back to your history and see a connection. No, you're jumping over and then there. And especially if he doesn't see those connections, if he thinks they're speculative, then he is doing a complete jump without a connective point for all those branches, which is pretty crazy to me. But bring that up as far as my view on why I think the European branch is the least, transmutated versus the other ones, because they're influx with others. And I would argue, like, again, did Deus or Zeus in the Greek, did he hold a scepter? And then after they met the Phoenicians, their head of their pantheon, Baal, has a lightning rod. Was there influence there? There's a lot of like little things that could be kind of talked about. But above the Alps, with the Gauls and the Slavs and the Teutons, there seems to be its own.
Yeah, that, and then to ponder and to go back over. What we're doing is functional. It's natural and appropriate for our folk. It is approved of. Certainly, it is approved of in broad terms. Hopefully, it is approved of in more finite terms by our gods, and the gift cycle that we have has been maintained for. We're in the 30th year of it consistently, so I think that speaks volumes and is one of the reasons that we have confidence in it. But that said, we have experienced quite a bit of technological issues this evening. We're going to try to get it all sorted out so it's not a struggle next week. Appreciate you guys bearing with us, and it's been great to go through our Hávamál study with you. Svan, thank you so much, as always, for being on here and sharing your wisdom with our folk. We appreciate it.
Thank you. It's always been fun. I want to do the Adas. I want to do more.
Well, cool. Sold. So, yeah, we will be back to start Vafthrusensmal in 2 weeks. Next year, we're still lining up, or I'm sorry, next week, we're still lining up exactly what the show's going to be, but we're going to give Svan a break over that week. And then, yeah, we'll get back to our Edda studies, and we'll have something good for you next week. I'm looking forward to that. I hope you guys have a great night, and till then, hail the gods, hail the folk, hail the AFA, and remember that victory never sleeps.
Have a good night, guys.